go live and jump into it. Our adoring fans will be waiting.
Oh, God, it's getting hot.
Waiting to tell us how we're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, we're live. Good morning to you, Jesse.
Good morning.
So yes, it's a time change in America. We've sprung forward. We've gone forward now. They do that in other countries around Africa, and they do in Europe, obviously. I'm used to that from Europe, but Africa, I'm not so much. I'm not sure whether they do the time change like we do. Oh.
I don't. I know enough to say I don't know.
Okay.
Which is a perfect segue into what we're going to talk about today on the DB.
Nobody knows what's going on.
No, well, I mean, we did get some more data. I mean, again, I go back to, I mean, I think, the audience, and for those in the community who are following this, like there's so many competing narratives and lack of explanations and transparency. And the best I try to tell people is focus on, your DV instructions, focus on the monthly IV issuances that are on a lag. We just got January. Focus on the visa bulletin a little bit, but like you cannot, people get pushed into, even myself, making predictions, dreaming up scenarios to explain things that we really don't know.
Yeah.
And it really, I would say, like, if I'm making a prediction and you're reading it, be doubtful, because I really can't know. I can tell you what I think, but what I think and what I know are two different things. And I know looking at like a monthly IV issuance report and distilling that data, that's what I know. And I can, and that's what I can tell you. And that's what I can actually focus. If I were going to go before a judge, right? And I'm trained to go before judges and explain and argue. And the judge is never going to say, hey, tell me what you think. The judge is going to say, what did Nairobi do in January, and explain why that's not sufficient based on a historical trend for diversity visas. Like that's what a good judge would do.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's what a good lawyer needs to do. And I need to be better at that. Honestly, I need to stop making predictions and narratives. But I have a question.
You're about 9 years behind me. That's, one of my wisdoms is, although I know the technology, I know the technique, I know the mathematics, I know all that, right?
Yeah.
But I know enough to know that when I make predictions that, that they can just, at a drop of a hat on a whim, they can change that. It's going to make the prediction look silly. And the problem with predictions is that some people tend to think, okay, everybody's prediction is the same. Well, that's not the case. And they also think that if you've made a prediction and you're wrong, and you often will be with predictions, that therefore other things you say are wrong, and that it's a free-for-all, so it undermines the credibility, I suppose, in the minds of the listener.
Well, I guess there's one thing maybe that is the most recent narrative, or maybe I think it's a misinformation that we should dispel right now, which is this processing ends because the form has a deadline on it.
So I don't know where that comes from. Are you talking about the OMB stuff?
Yeah, well, I guess someone was out there saying, well, KCC has to finish processing all 260s, and they won't do any more past April 30th.
Because that's the date of the form.
Correct.
Okay, so that's complete bullshit. We can dispel that 100% without any doubt whatsoever. That's complete bullshit.
All right.
So just to explain, government forms, and as you know, Jesse, to explain for the audience, but government forms often have some data in the top right-hand corner of the form. They'll have a time to complete, which is an estimated, and they call it burden, estimated time that needs to be spent on filling in this form, and that's because the government want to know what burden of paperwork they're placing on someone in order for them to go through a process, not just DV lottery, but any process, right? So there's always a burden. There's always a date, which is the expiration date of the form. And that simply means when they're going to review the form for changes and updates and that sort of thing. And they can be late on that review, and they often are late on that review. And it doesn't mean that you can't continue to use the form. So, for example, the I-134 currently is an expired date. It doesn't mean it's not usable. you can continue to use it until the new version comes. That's the third thing that's on forms, is the version. So yeah, people shouldn't, so the myth, therefore, that they're going to stop processing DS260s at the end of April, complete bullshit. And every year we see people being continued to be processed with submissions after that point, every year. So yeah, complete bullshit, that one.
Let me ask you another question that has come up a bit now with the regional kind of disparities in issuances. If a region doesn't hit a cap, and can they transfer visas to another region?
Yeah, there is something in the law that allows that, in the DV law, and it talks about exactly that scenario. Unused visas from one region can be transferred to other regions in limited ways. There are some rules about which regions can transfer to which regions, etc. There's a concept of it's complex, but anyway, there is that basic concept. However, I would throw that back and say, which region do you think is not going to use its allocation, and which region do you think has got time to exceed its allocation? I don't think either of those questions are sensible answers, right? I don't think we've got time to exceed the allocations in any regions. And I don't think we've got less selectees than is necessary to fill each of the regions, right? So I don't see a scenario where Africa is underfilling its region and Asia has maxed out, for example, which is probably the most common sort of perception. I think Asia is probably the most likely region to hit its cap, because Kathmandu is now online, and they're doing about 300 interviews per month, which means that they can get to about 3,000 to 3,500 issuances in Nepal. But I think Nepal is probably unlikely to hit the 7% cap, and I think the rest of the region doesn't have time to use all of those 5,000 visas, because that will largely be dependent on Iran, and Iranians will run out of time because of AP. So I think we're only going to see about 2,000 Iranians at most, and I think I think the rest of them would go to the rest of Asia, but that's going to be about 3,000 visas going to the rest of Asia. That's it. That's what we've got time for.
Yeah, so before we jump into questions, I mean, I was looking at the January monthly immigrant visa report, and one thing that really jumped out at me, I mean, many things did, right? Of course, but one of the things that really did was, Kiev had issued 65 DVs in January, which is pretty. I mean, if you look at compared to like Tbilisi and Nicosia, like some of the other more
one of the largest,
it really had been operating well. And now maybe there's not enough. Maybe there's not many left. I know there is, but it's really about who's picking up the slack. And I went through, and Frankfurt had only done 2, and that's one. London is gangbusters. London is probably the paradigm consulate, right? It just operates. It works. And then you have Warsaw. Warsaw had done 83. They're really going to be burdened though. I mean, they are picking up.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Vienna comes back. They have to start jumping on Stockholm. Maybe. I mean, it's really going to be something that people are going to talk about, and there's going to be narratives around, but we don't know.
Right. Well, and things are going to be very changed in Europe, particularly because of all the war crisis going on with Putin's idiocy. And so the concept, I've seen people saying, how do I get transferred to Warsaw? And I'm thinking, you're out of your bloody mind to try and get transferred to an overwhelmed consulate. And what people are sometimes doing is that they're looking at the numbers of the embassy, and they're saying, oh, this embassy has processed lots, therefore I should be there. Well, that's a really dumb way of thinking, frankly, because you don't want to literally jump out the frying pan into the hot fire. And Warsaw is the very definition of the hot fire right now, because they're having to take all of the people. They'll be taking Ukrainians and Russians mainly. Ukrainians should be going by default to Frankfurt, but also the Poles and other people from that region, right?
Yeah.
So why on earth would you try and be transferred to Warsaw? That's just crazy if you don't have to be. Frankfurt normally was a quiet embassy. And so it made total sense and obviously geographically well located for Ukraine. So it made sense to push work there, and they can step up. And I think what the other consulates have done, like, for example, we saw an announcement from Vienna that they were limiting their work. And I think what that meant was they were sending COs to Frankfurt, right?
Yeah.
In order to help out with the general crisis, which will mainly be directed towards refugees, not refugees, but obviously American citizens needing help and that sort of thing. But still, that's, Frankfurt made more sense to me. And then, maybe Vienna, Bern would be a good one. Bern's great, by the way. They do very low numbers, but they're prepared to help people. And so, some of them could step up.
Yeah.
Also, if you can help it, I think you'd be better off in Georgia, frankly.
And taking that EU region as a whole, when I go through, I mean, everyone's like, hey, nobody's satisfied. I'm not saying this like we're satisfied, but it's, if you had to rank it right now, they're operating better than the others, in my opinion, right? I mean, if you were just going to break it by region, all right. I think if you have a DS in there, even if it still says you're still in processing, if you're in a good rank number, it's March 13th. If you're in that in a level, they're going to skip over you, and don't be frustrated by that, but feel somewhat confident that they'll get around to you.
Right.
I mean, that's what I've been telling people in the EU, because I know there's a lot of stress there, but I mean, we've had clients actually this week who've gotten interviews, and again, I know my clients from the other regions are about to blast me on Telegram about that. But I mean, when I look at the state of the play, it doesn't make it right. It just makes it what it is. And right now, the EU, Madrid, all the way through that kind of Schengen area are doing a little bit. Now, obviously, the geopolitical things can change that very quickly.
Yeah.
But I think that's where we're at right now.
But if you looked at the reason, so the question should be asked why. There's the guy on Telegram, Shingy, bless you, Shingy, who every time he sees Africa not getting many, he's based in Johannesburg, I believe. And so when he sees Africa not getting any, to him, it's always like, discrimination is the word that comes to mind. Yeah. But the thing is that Europe, particularly Western Europe, has good consulates. It has fast processing because the databases there are very good. You've got access to the birth and death records and all that sort of thing. So it's normally very efficient in Western Europe, and it's normally not very busy. Because although London takes quite a few cases, there are not many. If you look at the size of the countries, there are not many selectees from France and Germany and Spain, etc. They're not. There's not many people there, right? So France, Germany, Spain, Italy, England, obviously, all low selectee counts, but efficient, and they can be a good set of embassies. If you look at conversely, you look at Africa. You got Addis, you got problems. You got Cairo, you got problems. You got Khartoum, you got problems, right? You got Kenya, Nairobi. Now just list those four, right, embassies, and think about the volume of the African work that goes through those four. Joburg was relatively big, to an extent. Abu Dhabi, Oman, they're important embassies too. But if you look on the shit list, I'm looking at my shit list right now. Yeah. My top bad boys are the most important ones for Africa. So Africa's capacity was wiped out by the decisions made at just a small number of embassies. And that's, frankly, I believe, why Africa it's not training badly, but it's training a little bit. And because it's got a bigger quota, that's the wrong place for it to be. It should be in front. right?
And that's really a good, another good segue, because everyone knows that there's a new visa bulletin coming. And, if you look at Africa was, like everyone was shocked. Hey, this is great. Look at 50,000. But then you just rattle off the shit lists, consulates, and you ask yourself, I can't get the math right.
No.
Right. I can't get the math right, because you're telling me 50K is current. And then I'm looking at the monthly. Cairo 18 in January, Nairobi 10 in January, Adiss 0, Khartoum 0. Okay, so Joburg 8, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, these are issuances.
Yeah.
So okay, so I know we're now in March, but okay, so let me get me to June. Okay, so if those, and you have Amman as well, Amman, Abu Dhabi.
Right.
So give me a number that makes sense for your visa bulletin and explain that. And this is where again, I feel like I'm running a campaign, but I'm really not. I would love to just sit with them in a friendly manner and kind of I wish we could do this and have a State Department official join us and really help people out there, mentally be able to understand, because we're getting, there's cross currents. You can't tell me Africa is 50K current and I can look at the January issuances and people from Cairo and Johannesburg and Adiss and Accra and all the countries you just mentioned are literally losing their minds.
Yeah.
They're literally,
as they should be, because there's no sense in it at all. But if you look at the number of selectees, for example, in Africa, so just to rattle off the selectee count, so Africa has 49,000 selectees. But if you consider that Sudan has 6,000 of those, Cairo, I think is close to 6K. Adiss had 3,000 of those. I mean, very quickly you realize that the shit list embassies control about half of the selectee population, almost half, right? So, EU has 40,000 selectees, but it's much better spread in terms of, there's a higher number of working consulates. Asia has 24,000 selectees, but again, the story in Asia is always about what happens in Nepal and Iran. And then OC and SA is 2,500 and 3,500 for those two, respectively. The reality is the big three regions have different stories going on, but they're all terribly impacted by these really obvious decisions. It's been an obvious abandonment of the DV cases in favor of other cases. And I think the January data just sort of continues to show that these massive numbers for E3s, massive numbers. I mean, most of the embassies are way above normal capacity now. But they're not giving any of that capacity to DV.
Yeah, and they, kind of, we know this because they came out and said, hey, we're going to do as many employment-based immigrant visas as we can.
Yeah.
I mean, and to be honest, as loud as the diversity visa winners are on social media and everywhere else, and, the EB immigrants who are faring wasting of visas and green cards are just as loud and just as, so you have these competing forces, and just playing devil's advocate, I feel like the State Department would tell you, like, well, we can't win. We're going to disappoint someone. And I would say, listen, here's the situation. You shouldn't be making those decisions because Congress has allocated visas. And, and one of them has a deadline and expires. And one of them really doesn't. And I don't need you to prioritize. What I need you to do is, when you want to, if you're going to do 100% for EB, great. Who cares? But you can't just say, okay, then we're going to do 30% for DVs. Okay. Give me, and this is flat out my position. It's been my position, and it's a reason why, it's always going to be my position during this entire time I litigate, is, 9% is what you do usually when you're at a 500,000 level. Give me 9%. I'll walk away. I've also, and just so the audience knows, and talking about my Husu and Preston cases, I have reached out to the government. I've told them flat out, I've put myself on the line. I've said, listen, I will not litigate another diversity visa lawsuit if you settle for our clients. I will walk away. And the only thing I ask you to do is take care of my clients, those in Sydney and those across the world that are a small population. And I've said that. I've said, listen, I just want to come to the table with you and handle this, because what I see now, for let's say January, you're at 3%. That's not going to do it.
Right.
And by the way, that 33, so they did 33,000. I just want to just stick to the math and the data because there's so many narratives. So they did 33,000 in January for immigrant visa issuances. And, we were in a different world with COVID and everything else at that time. That's a low number. And even in that low number, because they should be around 45, 48, maybe even at least 40. They were doing 3% of DVs. Okay. So we're not
2.87%, I think.
We're not there. And here's the funny thing, and I have explained this to my clients, and everyone will say, why would they settle with you? Aren't they told they have to fight everything? I would say, listen, why would, and again, I'm a former Department of Justice attorney. Okay, so I've been on the other side of this case. Why would we want to fight and spend, our credibility fighting with a judge against the words of the president who has supported diversity visas if for 100 plaintiffs, if we intended to do 35 to 40,000 this year? It makes no sense for them. It makes no sense to them. So we're going to learn something either way, right? They're going to say, we're not bothering with the Husu and Preston cases because we're doing 35 and 40, and why fight them? Why fight them?
Right.
Or they're going to do 3%, and they're going to say, well, we have to fight them because we're never going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. So two comments about embassy capacity, and if we look at all visa types, this is on the charting by Nguyen, really useful information. This has now got the January data. If we look at capacity pre-pandemic of immigrant and non-immigrant, you can see roughly they were doing about 600K per month on average. There's 600K there. So about 600K was about the average. They sometimes went over, sometimes a little bit less, but about that, right? They're returned now in terms of capacity. They've gone back in to about 450,000. That's their capacity that they're using right now. So yes, there is some impact on consulate work as a whole. We can see that. That's reasonable. But in terms of immigrant visas, the capacity is almost returned to normal, right? If you look at what they did in January compared to a normal month, it's on the low side, but it's almost back to normal. About, you would say the average is probably about 37K, 36K, and they did 33, right? So, but the difference is you're saying that in old times they were doing, on average, the DV cases accounted of 9% of this volume, and right now they just gave 945, which is 2.87% of the 33,000 they did.
Yeah.
So there's been a clear decision against DV in favor of other types.
Yeah,
it's absolutely crystal clear, and it's not justified in law.
And that see, I knew that was happening too. And again, I don't want this. It's not me. I mean, I'm not the only one out there. I think others are in the space, including yourself and Curtis and Chuck and Greg. Everyone has realized this, and this is why when people say, "Well, either number one, why were you bringing a lawsuit in February, or why are you going to bring it now?" It's because we need to get them back to trend, because there's nothing in the law that says, and I know they think otherwise, but there's nothing that says you have to deprioritize diversity visas. And there's actually not a whole lot of discretion that says you can operate with less than good faith towards that number. And if there's a good reason for that, I have yet to see it. And I've been litigating this since 2020. Okay. And so it used to be, hey, there's an immigrant ban, so we can't. Then it was, we've rank ordered them. And this was the start. That was a shift. We've rank ordered how we have to prioritize.
Yeah.
And then the judge was like, well, why would you put diversity visas last? That makes no sense. They're the only ones that expire. And then they were like, you're right. And now what they've done is they've just put up a veil, and they're doing what they are said they could not do and prioritize.
Right.
They're just not doing it publicly. And but through a lawsuit, they're going to have to say, like, it's crystal clear. You cannot hide the data. You cannot hide the math. That being
why did you remove the policy?
Yeah.
Why, we probably need to examine what they said in terms of removing the policy. But why did you remove that public policy as a statement and allow the reality to continue based on embassy discretion, etc.?
And
when you clearly instructed them what to do.
And honestly, this is probably a good maybe way to talk about the lawsuits from 2020 on. I do believe the Department of State took it quite personally, and they've allowed the personal feelings. You never really want your feelings to become part of a legal story. You don't. It's not good business. And I think that the State Department actually have taken it offensive that they've been told from these diversity visa people that they have to treat them the same as everybody else. And I don't know why. I feel like we need to get a couple adults in the room and just say, listen, let's reset. No one's saying you can't do your job. Nobody's saying whether you're doing a good job or a bad job. That I'm not making a value judgment. I'd really just want you to, if we're going to revisit, or if we're going to build back better, right? Let's build back the house. Okay. We have a lot of geopolitical events. Let's just go back to 9%.
Right.
And shut me up. Like, let's go. Yeah. And,
yep.
I just don't understand. We've really lost, kind of the long view here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's time to have a conversation.
Yeah. Let's take some questions.
Let's do it.
So the first question, I promised I would actually answer this one, is, do we have any advice for the limbo situation? Just to be clear, when this is, so Curtis has wrongly said that this was to do with being current. It's not being current. It's the point at which you're allocated to an embassy. If you then ask the KCC what your situation is, they send an email that says, you are now current for interview processing. That's the specific phrase you look for, current for interview processing. And it means that they've allocated your case to the embassy, but they may not have sent it to the embassy, right? Well, they haven't sent it to the embassy. If you haven't got your 2NL, then actually the embassy doesn't know anything about you. Now, when you're in that current for interview processing phase, KCC will no longer make any changes for you. They won't change your embassy. They won't change your form. They won't unlock your form, nothing. They won't make any changes. And they tell you to call the embassy to make changes. The problem is they've not sent your case to the embassy, so the embassy doesn't know anything at all about you, has no way to do anything on your case. And I don't think, Jesse, I don't have a solution for this for someone that's been allocated to an embassy, but it's been 2 months or 3 months that they've been allocated to the embassy and they're in limbo. I don't have a solution because they can scream at KCC till they're blue in the face, and KCC won't seem to do a damn thing to help them. They've really screwed this up.
No, it's really something that you'd love to see fixed, but really I can't sit here and
there's no advice, right?
Offer something that I don't know the answer to, and I won't. I just think, number one, my first reaction would be, if this happened to me and I had an embassy that was not on the shit list, I'd be like, okay, I've made it this far, and I'm going to be patient a little bit. And let me see, if I was assigned to an embassy on the shit list, I think you focus on, okay, it really doesn't matter because if my embassy's not working, quite frankly, what am I do? Now you tell yourself, well, I want to transfer. And I'm on record saying I don't like the transfer game. I think it's more risky than it's worth unless you're moving for a job or family member or you have a valid reason. But if your reason for transferring is, hey, there's a better embassy that will take my case, that's just not something I recommend. And that doesn't mean you can't do it. It's just not something that I would recommend. But yeah, I don't have a limbo situations. It's certainly an issue. And it's frustrating. It's also frustrating. Let's ask this question. I've emailed the KCC 47 times in the last 7 days. They keep telling me I'm in processing, but I submitted in May.
Mm-hmm.
Help me, Simon. You told me this wouldn't happen to me.
Yeah. No, I didn't tell anyone that wouldn't happen. But yeah. But yeah, exactly. That's a great question. And it makes no sense now because the original concept was, and I think everybody believed this. I mean, people argue with me about processing, DS-260 processing, but I think almost everybody believed that DS-260s are processed or at least opened in the order in which they were submitted. But we now have so many cases which are still, they were submitted in May and June and July, and they're still not processed. They're still told that, as you say, that it'll be just a few more weeks for processing. Whereas we now have people that have submitted as late as February and have not only been processed, but they've been scheduled. They've got 2NLs. Mm-hmm. And so, it's nuts, right?
Well,
there's little justification for this chaos that they're doing.
A little light just popped up in my head. And for those of you, I mean, I know everyone here is, knows about the diversity visa program and maybe they don't. Let me explain to you. So I litigate a lot of cases against USCIS. They handle all the visa petitions in the United States. And when they've come out, they always say, hey, we do things first in, first out, right? Just like you would think the DS-260s. That's what they say. They say it all the time. Every lawsuit, they say, hey, listen, we can't get to you. We do everything first in, first out. And I can tell you in every case that our firm and all the other lawyers litigate and through discovery, we know that's not true. They never do things first in, first out.
Yeah.
They never do that. And so if you're sitting there and saying, hey, this is supposed to go first in, first out. Yeah. Well, that's not the reality. Okay. It's not.
It's not in any type of immigration.
We talked last week about reasons why you could be subject to extra processing. There's also human error. There's also many things. But the other thing is this, and this is just maybe my knowledge of how the government works. They have, obviously, this is not new news. They're not gonna respond to 30,000 emails a day. So they're gonna have a button, right? Maybe it's an auto reply and it's boilerplate, and they're just gonna be like, good, and they're just gonna hit you back with the same little response because they cannot possibly respond to you and say, oh yeah, you're right. Yep, you're still processing. We're gonna get to your case right now. Stay tuned. We'll get back to you in an hour. Yep, you're all processed. See you later. I mean, it's not
right.
It's not
like that. No, exactly. No, the people that take the emails are not the people doing the processing. There's no actual connection between these systems. It's not like, as you say, an agent could say, oh my God, that sounds crazy. I agree with you, Johnny. That sounds mad. You submitted in May. You're entitled to your DS-260 process. I'll do it for you right now. It's not like they can do that. They don't have those systems, apparently, which is nuts.
And I will say, I'm very sympathetic to the people who reach out to me because they think like they're the only one. And I want to tell everyone, you're not. They're not singling you out. You're not alone. You are unfortunately part of a larger problem. And so I don't know if that makes you feel good or bad. It just is. You're so if you see yourself, oh, I'm still processing, but everyone else, it's not everyone else. There are others just like you.
Yeah. Mr. Robert, congratulations. He's off to New York. That's awesome.
Good.
I think you've explained this. I just looked at this one. This question was, can you explain Jesse's latest post? Your latest post was about the 33,000 and the 2.87% that you calculated. And I think we just went through the explanation of that. The 9,095 is the 2020.
Yeah.
The appeals are ongoing, right? So just a quick thing on 2020 and 2021. We know that the government for some time had been saying that they were needing to make necessary system changes by April 18th. And that seemed to give the impression that after April 18th, they could begin to do the work of scheduling and that sort of thing. It didn't ever mean that someone was going to get their visa on April 19th or anything like that. But for 2020 and 2021, there was system work that has to be done. Then the government appealed all of those cases, essentially. I think they've appealed them all now. And so there is now an ongoing legal fight that could continue past April. And so, we really don't have, any updates. I wouldn't have thought on that, Jesse, right? There's nothing.
No, I mean, there was a stay that was contingent on the government requesting an expedited appeal, meaning an appeal that goes faster than the normal process.
Yeah.
They've done that. And so there'll be no DV 2020 visas issued. Absent a change in course on the stay, and most likely not until this expedited appeal is decided, and again maybe another appeal. So again it goes back, and so everyone would say, why are they continuing to fight these appeals? And it's part of number one, willful blindness on part of the president, who doesn't understand that his own agency is operating against what he's publicly saying. And number two, it's the State Department who is willing to fight for its discretion not to have anyone tell them that they can issue visas past the deadline. That is a very big legal issue for them. Right.
So the same question here from Veroshan.
Yeah.
Murtaza is asking, it's kind of an interesting question. If the interview is scheduled, there's no need for joining a lawsuit. So right now there is no lawsuit you can join. But just taking the question, there is a possibility that you get stuck in AP, or that the embassy cancel your interview, and you might go back into a waiting phase, right? So it's not impossible that you won't then later need a lawyer. So be nice to Jesse.
No,
in the meantime, don't be mean to Jesse.
I will say, I have become so busy that not in the diversity visa space, but with other people waiting on non-immigrant and immigrant visas who are stuck in administrative processing for years. A lot of Iranian nationals, unfortunately, but others as well. Administrative processing really is it's a black hole that you just sometimes you just can't get out of unless you do file a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. Power Coffee is asking, why is the VB not being published? Because they were always published on the 7th and 8th. Right, so firstly, they've almost never been published on the 7th. The 8th is about the earliest date I've ever seen. 15th is the normal timeline, so it's not late yet. We get this question every month. I get this for the 9 years I've been doing this. Every single month, somebody has asked me the same question in some way or another. So no. Mr. Robert did get the DV lottery. That's why he's here. Cases at MVC. Right. The at MVC status shown in SEAC simply is a starting thing. It's like being on the first rung of the ladder. Right, you're not going. You haven't gone anywhere yet, and every case starts at MVC.
Yeah.
By the way, I was shouting, screaming. No, screaming was the word. Screaming at my my audience. I talk loudly. If I'm screaming at you, it's just through passion. It's not because I'm pissed off with anyone.
I mean, my question for this person, like everyone needs to understand. So, being current, having been processed, is very important. I don't want to downplay that. My next question is this: tell me your embassy, because as we've seen through the data, the embassy is what matters right now. Right. Where are you assigned?
Right, exactly. So Omar was asking, by the way, this question normally this is the same question you asked earlier. This question does normally come from Asia. That's normally the way you've heard it, right? I don't think people in EU or Africa are looking to take additional quota. It's normally Asia. The thing is, this sort of transfer, by the way, would not happen until the final month anyway. It's not. They're not going to pull the plug on EU and say, "Oh, EU's being slow and lazy, so we're gonna take all of their quota and put it to Asia right now." So it's only going to help a few hundred people at most. It's not like we could see Asia getting 15,000 visas. It's just not going to happen. Okay, so don't rely on that. Do you think U.S. Embassy and Adiss will resume the interview? I think this is an important point. So finally, Adiss has seemed to have given a suggestion they're going to start some work, right?
Yeah.
But they've said limited capacity, so we know how that goes. It's going to be, they'll probably do a few in month one and a few more in month two. It's not going to be enough. But
they're not
hopefully
they're not going to do 2980.
Right. Now there are some people in limbo at Adiss for sure, right? And so those people will be the first cases scheduled. But again, we don't know how many are in that sort of allocated position and what the capacity is that Adiss are going to open up. So you're going to have to wait and see what they do.
And I have, it's funny because I have a lot of clients from Adiss. I have people in that limbo situation who are extremely low numbers. And I'm very passionate about my clients from Ethiopia because they're very passionate people. And I will say, God willing, they damn well better be the first people who get an interview, or I'm going to be jumping from the up and down because really obviously there's some civil strife. I'm not going to downplay that, but they've held them in limbo, so they can't transfer, right? It goes back to the situation. So I do think Adiss is going to move. I know Curtis has a lawsuit on that. God bless him for that. We're both fighting kind of the same thing. Khartoum as well. But again, it speaks to, based on the data we have now, where is this going to go? And if Adiss doesn't come on, if Accra doesn't come back, Nairobi, everyone needs to do more. We know that. So,
right. Sad question here from Jeremy. We're about to explain why it's sad. So, Jesse, I played DV as single because my wife left me 5 years ago, told me the children we have together was not my children. So if the answer to this is always so it sounds like this person was legally married at the time that they entered the lottery and also had biological children at the time they entered the lottery, and clearly probably didn't add the children nor the spouse to the lottery entry. And in that situation, you should not proceed. You're either going to be disqualified because they know about the kids and they know about the spouse, etc. And you may have revealed that through previous applications for the DV entry. It may be available through public databases in your country. Don't know. But they either find out about the wife and kids, or they don't find out about the wife and kids. You think you've got away with murder kind of thing. You move to America, and then you're, someone in your life lets the government know that you got to America through fraud, and you then get deported from America. You get, even if you're a citizen, you can have your citizenship taken away, and you could be kicked out of the country, right? I mean, because you got the green card based on a lie. You got it by fraud, and you can't do that. So, Jeremy, my advice to Jesse, do you agree? But my advice to Jeremy would be just stop.
I guess maybe I don't understand the question a little bit, because if he did he enter as single because his wife left him 5 years ago and he's worried about the children, or is he worried about, because if he won himself and his wife left him 5 years ago,
but left him without divorce, and if he entered as single, and so I've been reading these sort of questions for 9 years, so I'm reading between the lines, but I'm interpreting that to say that he entered as single, meaning he didn't enter the children. He may be legally married. It may have been a traditional marriage, which you could arguably say wasn't a legal marriage. There's that can be argued both ways. But regardless, I believe in this case, and I'm reading between the lines, but I'm assuming that he didn't include the children. So he should have included the children, and he should have included the spouse if he was technically legally still married. Not
well,
divorced.
here's the follow-up.
He should have entered divorced. If he was divorced, he should have said divorced, right?
Correct. Here's the follow-up, though. Let's change it, because we've seen this hypothetical. I'm the principal winner. I won. My wife, I put my wife on there. She's changed her mind. She doesn't want to go.
Right.
Can I still go to the interview and get my green card and leave her behind?
Yes.
Yeah, that because that comes up a lot though, more than
Yeah,
I would think.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that you can. People are worried that they can't process. Often, I see that asked by female spouses, and what I answer is yes, you can. You can go with the yourself and the kids, but how are you going to manage, right? If your husband is the current breadwinner and he doesn't, for whatever reason, he doesn't want to go to America because he likes it wherever he is, how are you going to manage? Number one, your kids are going to be unhappy. Number two, you're going to struggle to find a job, that will support you and the kids. It's like, if you're used to having your husband there as a breadwinner, do you have the ability to go and do that? Now, that's me being an old guy. If you're a woman that's got a fantastic career in qualifications and everything else, then go for it. Absolutely, you don't need a man. We live in a modern world, right? You don't need a man, but think about how you're going to survive and what the CEO is going to assume because of that.
I probably need to be quiet. My wife's going to look for diversity visa programs for other countries so she can leave me here.
Nobody would leave you.
That's another story. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the question for Jeremy. So my advice is don't continue if my assumption is correct. If you left your legally married spouse or any of your children, and by the way, if you go into an interview and you try and tell them the story that you're telling here, the spouse told you they're not your children, and therefore that's why you didn't put them on the entry. You are guaranteed to be laughed out the embassy, right? And disqualified, right? Because no, that's just not happening.
And again, for those of you who are about to get your 2&Ls and your interviews and you're preparing now as you should, and you're reading the DV 2022 instructions and you're getting your documents together, your credibility is everything. This can be a 10-minute interview and a visa, or it can be a 30-minute interview and a denial.
And a lifetime ban. In this case, that would end up with a lifetime
ban. Like, do prepare. Like, do what you can.
Yeah. This guy, he's got all the classic signs of someone who's going to try and thinks he can convince the CEO of this, super story, and he'll be fine. No, I've seen that tried before, and it isn't going to work. So please, Jeremy, don't think you can get away with that. So Pa is asking another question now. Case number is AF 31,000, seem to be current to the VB, but the embassy in Ghana seems to be working slower than expected. Do you think? Right. So I don't know whether you're going to get 2&L this month, next month, or any time, but you're right. Ghana is working slower than expected. There's a problem, they don't seem to be increasing very much.
I know people will disagree, but let me explain why I don't think you would if they were following the regulations, because there's probably people with lower numbers who, if they're following the regulations and going by rank order, those people should go first. And I know that there are people with lower numbers who haven't been scheduled. That's what I would say.
Right.
Doesn't mean you won't in the coming months, but they have a lot of lower numbers to get through before they get to 31.
Yeah, exactly. Slightly odd question from Kenneth here, saying he's AF 59,000. He says is current and scheduled for interview. I think, firstly, Kenneth, I think you're misunderstanding what you're being told by KCC. I don't think they've told you that it's scheduled for interview, because there's no case number current at your number there, 59,000, right? Unless it's 5,900, and you've just put too many asterisks there. So you can't unlock. That's very odd. I think maybe Kenneth has got a 5,900 number, not 59,000.
So the question is, what embassy?
Yeah, exactly. But it's very hard for us to sort of to try and guess dates of interviews and that sort of thing, right? So I've
told people, so you can do kind of like the best I can tell you, everyone out there, to do is this. Look at kind of a data plot and kind of you can see like chunks of numbers and then see where you stack up to those chunks. So if you have
Right.
there'll be if there'll be a cluster of around, like as we're at EU, right? There'll be a cluster around 10,000, and you can say, okay, March 10,000, and then there'll be someone with like 20 and someone with 19, but there'll be a cluster, and that's kind of the best way I could maybe tell you how to forecast it. So if but Africa is so different because you have, and MENA is so different because you have embassies who are doing nothing, and you don't have that in other in Sydney, of course, as well, but that's a different story. But
right.
for Africa, it's really hard maybe to find that cluster, because it really depends on, is your embassy on board, is it online?
Right. Interesting question here. I don't know if we've ever discussed this, so I'd like to show someone this answer. Where can we see how many issued visas there are in Ankara or Yerevan or Abu Dhabi for Iranians, right? And this is an interesting one. So what I tend to do is, let me show my screen, add to stream. Okay. So what I do to answer this, so we would know that if somebody was from the Asia region in Ankara, they are highly likely to be Iranian, right? Now, it's not 100%, sort of scientific, but it is possible to think of it that way and to just get an idea. So if we look at Ankara, and obviously most of the EU cases there are going to be Turkish, right? So far we can see they've issued that number of cases, but that's all the regions. So if we then separate out and say, okay, look for the Asia region, you can see that there's almost 60 cases in issued 18. Sorry, 18 were ready in the low case numbers there. So you look at the issued numbers. So they've issued 18 there, 13. Got issued 13, 19, so something like 40 cases. So if we're just looking at that and we look at how many have been issued, and how many are scheduled, etc., you look at all the regions, and that will be for the embassy, and look at Asia region to just know what's Iranian, roughly speaking. And this won't be 100% accurate, but when I try and figure out how many how many Iranian people have got issued so far, this is the way to do it, right? And you can do that across the three embassies that we're talking about there. Same with Yerevan and Abu Dhabi, right? Abu Dhabi is a little bit different, obviously, but anyway. So there's another question here about increasing to 85,000. That was something that Biden said. He talked about raising the DV lottery to 80,000, but it's not law, son of Syed. How's your dad, by the way? So it's not law. It's not happening at the moment, and it would take a change in law in America to make that happen. It's not just something the president can make happen by executive order. Okay. Kenneth, yeah, we talked about this with Kenneth, I think. Yeah. Oh, actually, this is a different question. Did my lottery in South Africa, but chose to be interviewed in Ghana. Is it a wise decision you made? Well, you're between two shit list embassies there. Firstly, it doesn't matter where you fill in your lottery entry from, right? It doesn't matter which country you were in at the time you applied, or where you were when you filled in your DS-260. It doesn't make any difference. So you did your lottery in South Africa, but you chose to be interviewed in Ghana. Unfortunately, both Johannesburg and Ghana are both going very slow. So you're stuck between a rock and a hard place there, really.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. 995. Any comment about Warsaw Embassy? We did talk about this earlier. I wouldn't be moving to Warsaw Embassy unless you can help it. For Russians, that's where they go. And, for Poles, that's where they're going. So, but it's a very busy embassy right now. They're probably overwhelmed with, with people escaping the war, as well as including people from Russia escaping the impacts of the war, which is going to be an economic disaster for Russia.
Yeah. I will say, that embassy is not turning its eye away from DV. It's just going to be inundated with other visa requests. Doesn't mean they're not going to to do enough D visas, just that there's supply and demand. And right now the demand, they just got a ton of more demand because they're taking on that excess capacity. Now, if you're assigned to them and you have a visa that maybe you can go to London or another EU country, maybe that's an option for you. But again, you need to do your homework and have the ability to travel to London. Did I lose you, Simon?
No. You're sorry. I was just sorry. I'll get to this in a moment, but I'm just very excited about this news. Nguyen is the guy that puts that Tableau data together. It's one of the people behind the Save Diversity thing. It does a lot for this community, and he's just got his visa, so I'm just thrilled about that. So congratulations.
Yeah. No, that's yeah. I'll tell you the best this is important, because I guess I'm putting myself out here with you, and I know that people don't always like what we have to say, but the best part of my day every day, or when it happens, is when I have a client who gets the interview notice. And then the worst part of my day, because I have all the clients together in one chat for each case. And the worst part is when the rest of the 98 that are left, because we've had I think 12 get the 2-and-outs, is the rest of them are like, well, maybe I'm next, and so there is this juxtaposition that people have out there. And I've called it today on Twitter, it's like a daily lottery. And that's the one thing I would change, right? Where it's almost like, how courts ask for status updates. They should issue, and it shouldn't just be the visa bulletin, because now we know, unless they're going to make that visa bulletin accurate, they should issue for the diversity visa program. They should really do status updates, because if you really are off the boat, if you really are done, they should allow those people to
know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And why not? So, if I were king of the castle, it's like if I, it's like if you have a tryout and they have a first cut, a second cut, a third cut, right? You didn't make the team, bud. Sorry.
Right.
Try next year.
Right. Exactly. So for that transparency, I have so much agree with this point. For the transparency, if they would tell you, for example, truly what's going on with the DS260, how many DS260s did they receive? How many of those have they processed? When are they going to get to yours? Why is yours in line? Are you being held up because of background checks? Fine, tell me that. Yeah. I know you're not going to tell me which background checks, but tell me that I'm held up for background checks. Don't endlessly send me emails saying it'll be a few weeks for processing, when that's obviously bullshit. Just tell me. We opened your DS260 on July 10th, and then we decided that we needed background checks, so that's why you're waiting. Okay, well, people would know, right? They would at least know.
And again, I'm a former government, attorney, and I'm never going to say I hate the government. Like I don't. I love the government. I'm here for a reason, right? I mean, I still believe it's the best country on earth. I still believe that we have imperfections, but we can perfect it. And it's just really about getting people to have a conversation and fixing it, and because it would save the government money, right? They just spent $500,000 to update their system to do nothing on the DV 2020.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's my money. That's like my taxpayer money. Like, what are you doing with that?
Yeah, exactly. It's frustrating. Okay, quick question. So we can take another few minutes of me. I've got to go to the beach and clean up a beach today.
Good for you.
I'm doing a beach cleanup with my daughter. But advice for me and my wife. She's moved to Africa. I'm still in Turkey. She's the principal applicant. So really, interviews need to happen together. People often ask this about consular processing. Can I interview in one consulate and then get an interview somewhere else for my spouse and my kids? And generally, I always tell people, no, that's not possible. Now, it is, I think, technically possible. There isn't a follow to join process like the I-824, but it may be possible. But it's such a risk because everyone's waiting for, one appointment, let alone waiting for two. So you're much better off in this case to get the interview in one place or the other, and then fly, get on a plane, interview together.
So a couple points with this. Number one, the principal always has to go first.
Yep.
And if you don't get that second interview, you can come to the United States and either petition for them to follow to join, or actually go through the whole visa petition process now that you're a lawful permanent resident of the United States. So all is not lost, but Simon's correct. In a perfect world, perfect situation, you would just bite the bullet and interview together. Probably save yourself some money in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Save yourself some money and some risk. Interesting perspective you just gave, though. So if you were in a consular processing, let's say, and I'm not sure I want to suggest this to someone because it sounds a bit risky, but if you got your interview and you got your visa today and you got on a plane and we went to America and you're now an LPR, it's not an open visa you've got, but you're saying at that point it would be similar to someone who's done AOS in the States and is an LPR and therefore does an I-824. So you could do a follow to join at that point by entering early enough and then trying to arrange the interview back in a different consulate.
You can do that. You could also file a new I-130 if the 824, like if it lapsed and you said if your wife didn't want to come now, come in a couple of years. Right. You know, you could do that.
Yeah, the I-130 though, that's like a 2-year minimum process, right? It's
I don't know. I mean, no, I wouldn't say 2 years. I'd say depending on where you are, 9 to 12.
I just took 18 months for citizenship.
Yeah, well, that's
everything's screwed right
crazy
now.
town.
Yeah.
You know what's crazier though? This goes to this may be a good way to tie up. You know, first in, first out. We had in our firm, we had a guy file his N400 40 days ago and get an interview. And we told him it was going to be a year. So now he's yelling at us. He's like, "Hey, I'm not ready for the test, man." Right. And we're sitting here like, what the, so now we look like idiots, right? Attorneys look like the idiots because we told this person, "Hey, man, don't worry about it. You got a year at least."
Yeah.
And now he got an interview in Chicago in literally like 30 days. So they're picking, and it speaks to not only lack of transparency, but it's not first in, first out. It never has been. It never will be. It's maybe first look, first out, and they look at different cases at different times, and there's different officers who do different work. That's the best I can offer.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a random situation. Okay. One more quick question, perhaps.
Sure.
Omicron, the embassy was assigned closed since last month of February. So what should we do about that? Yeah. I mean, basically you've got to get a transfer, right? So how are you finding transfers, Jesse? Are you finding any of your clients are being offered transfers? Are you finding any helpfulness from KCC on this at all, or?
No, I mean, I think we had one person who actually changed from Sydney to Nepal. And I don't know how that happened, honestly, because they've denied every other request. My recommendation would be if you're doing a transfer, you better have a really good reason. And, but I don't see a consistent pattern, especially not in the MENA region. For those who are trying to play it, I mean, if you're in Afghanistan, if you're in Kabul or Baghdad, sure. I mean, you're going to get transferred, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in Johannesburg and you want to go to somewhere else, or if you're in, Sydney is still refusing all of them.
Yeah.
So I don't have enough good information to provide.
No, fair enough. Okay. So that's probably the last question, but okay. Thanks, Jesse, for your time again this morning. We continue the battle, and hopefully we'll have better news in this next couple of weeks.
Yeah. Now, again, I would tell everyone, this is what I tell my clients. This is what I tell everyone out there. If you're a DV 2022 winner, okay, the only thing you can really do is prepare like your interviews tomorrow. Go read the instructions, review your documents. You shouldn't have educational or occupation questions or I-134 sponsor questions when your interview's in 10 days. Like, don't wait. Don't wait. Spend your time off social media and on those instructions in your documents.
Prepare well. Yeah.
Prepare
well.
Yeah.
Read the bloody instructions. The instructions are important. Read the instructions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
Very good.
Go do have fun.
Thanks, man. Have a good day.
Be good.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.